interesting thing for me is Draymond is such a well-spoken and intellectual guy. But on the court, is he really doing this out of emotion, or is he doing this because it's planned? Right. And I kind of, it's interesting. Like, I can get caught up in the heat of the moment. A lot of dudes that used to play basketball, we would say I got caught up in the heat of the moment a lot, maybe too much. So maybe it's two different guys, right? Like, maybe you are a different person on the court. So.
All right, welcome to another episode of What Are They Going to Say Now? Jay and Tony back here with you, and this is our 25th episode, and so we thought it was about time to bring on our first ever guest.
Yeah, we're excited. He's the co-host of the SwooshLife Podcast, and then he does a bunch of other things too. He's a reviewer for Malt Official, and he's a whiskey aficionado, grill master, in and out super fan, Midwest sports guy. Yeah. Matt Kusek, what's up, buddy?
Hey, man, thanks for having me. Yeah, I was telling the crew, I didn't know that I was going to be your first guest, so super honored to be that. But yeah, you've probably noticed from my Instagram, I work with Grill Masters, so I cannot assume that title. It's like when I write for Malt Official. Malt Official is the handle on socials, guys. Maltreview.com is the website, so I do quite a bit of things. Tony also big in the whiskey industry, so that's
how
our
we
commonality
met,
there. I really appreciate that. But yeah, you probably saw, like, I was in Vegas earlier this year for work, and it was fantastic because I think I ate In-N-Out twice a day for 3 days straight because I stayed at one hotel and the convention was in between that In-N-Out on the Strip. So
you definitely roll with In-N-Out over Five Guys.
Oh, how is that even a question? I thought you guys were going to ask me.
No, I just love it.
People
I
out
love
here
it
are
because
crazy,
for me, it's a no-brainer. It's In-N-Out. Yeah.
Yeah, it's 1,000%. And I used to, in my youth, I used to love Whataburger, and that used to really be like among folks in the southern U.S. There was the big Whataburger versus In-N-Out thing, and I would say, yeah, if you like chicken sandwiches and chicken tenders, I love Whataburger too. But I've just fallen in even more in love. It's like every time I go out west, that's the first thing I do. And if you follow my Instagram, I take a lot of late night flights because I have young kids, so I want to spend as much time as I can with them. I went to Colorado, and at midnight, I'm at the In-N-Out. That was my first stop.
Nice. I think I told you that. That's always my first stop going back home too. I'm like, which In-N-Out am I going to? Driving back to Sonoma. So yeah.
Awesome, Google makes it easy. You just put In-N-Out locations and it pops up.
Hey, when you factor in price too, I mean, it can't be beat, right?
That's literally the only fast food I eat. I never eat fast food, but In-N-Out, I'm like, and I don't drink soda, but In-N-Out with like a Coke. Yeah.
You have to. Well, and I think an interesting tell there is they don't have to grease the griddles. So a little bit of my cooking background coming out here. They don't grease the griddles because there's the quality of the fat content in the beef. They just throw it on the griddle just as is. They don't have to add any oils or anything like that. So and it's never frozen, fresh, never frozen. So
that's why when you do burgers, you got to do 80-20. None of this lean 90-10, 85-15. You got to go 80-20. Get that fat,
There you go.
I'm still a guy that mixes my Diet Coke with regular Coke. I go 50-50 just to like pretend I'm like fake healthy. But yeah, when it's burgers, you got to go all in, especially if you're going to throw cheese on that thing.
We're not sponsored by In-N-Out, but we're all fans. So. All right, so yeah, I guess we're going to get into some NBA topics. Not necessarily like the standings and overall what's happening in some of the matches. But some of the hot button stuff.
Yeah, we're 2 games into the first round and most of the series at this point.
I wouldn't panic if I were you guys.
Yeah, we'll see.
A little worry.
We'll see if the Warriors can go back home and hold serve at Chase Center and make it 2-2. Then, it's a whole different ball game. But, they were both close games. So
absolutely,
we'll see. What's your team? I assume you're a Bulls fan.
I grew up a Chicago Bulls fan, so if you guys want to have some Bulls versus Warriors arguments, I'm happy to have that. And, being a Bulls fan, that's why I said you guys probably shouldn't worry. You're the defending champs. You're down 2-0, but I would say this. Like, I seen a lot of try-hard young Bulls teams that looked good. The D-Rose and Pau Gasol teams, the Luol Deng, Kirk Heinrich, Ben Gordon teams, and you're like, wow, they really tried hard, and Tom Thibodeau has them at the top of the standings. And at the end of the day, like, talent wins out, and there's a reason y'all got those chips. So it's going to be an interesting series to see for sure. I just don't know. I don't know that Sacramento has it in them for 7 games. But then again, I mean, you guys are getting a little long in the tooth, so not to throw daggers.
Yeah.
We are a great home team. We have the best home record in the league. So that's what I'm hoping to hold serve. But we also don't have home court in the series. So that's a problem. We'll see.
It'll be interesting for sure.
It will be. And it was, I mean, quite a weekend, obviously, because I know one of the topics you guys wanted to touch on was the Stars going out because of charges.
Yeah. I think we've seen too extreme a reaction. I forget, was it Sam Amick or someone on The Athletic wrote the whole thing about how they should get rid of charging in the NBA. And it's like, that's way too far. But what I think they should do is get rid of you keep charging as a rule. You need to have that so guys can't just drive through the guy's chest, although they do that a lot anyway. And without calling that, we saw plenty of that last night. Mm-hmm. But get it where the defender has to be making a basketball play. As in, you're not going to stand there like the Statue of Liberty or like in a coffin like this, just and slide under the guy, which is how both those guys got hurt, the offensive player in both cases. It's not a basketball play. You're not making a play at the ball,
Yeah, I think one of my major issues with it is it feels like they officiate it to call the charge first, right? Like that's just the automatic thing that they're thinking of is, if it's close, it's a charge. And I'd like to see that switch the other way where, where you're penalizing them more, right? And if it's a charge, it really has to be like the guy's in perfect position and you call that play because guys are out there just taking reckless charges because they know that a ref's going to be swayed by you falling down or, yelling or whatever it is to sell the call. So, yeah, and people are getting hurt, man.
Well, it does go back to the flop, right? Like nobody likes the flop as a play, right? So it was like, hey, establish position, make sure you get there. So I think one of the reasons I conned you guys into having me on as your first guest is I did say I used to be a high school official. I was certified high school official. I only did grade school and men's rec league games, right? Okay. But one of the guys, shout out to Siri, used to run a Filipino basketball association here in Chicago. He helped me with the test. And he just said, and this is back in the day, that's how old I am. It was a written test. It wasn't like a virtual test or anything like that. It was a take home and you had to like check the boxes and write out stuff.
Hey, we're older than you.
The question is old. Right. So, well, I appreciate that. I know you guys checked my ID at the door. It was great. But, what he told me is always think about like who is taking advantage of who in a situation. That'll kind of help you make the call. The thing about this is I live in a gray world most of the time. And it really depends if you're defensive minded or offensive minded, right? So if you're offensive, you're really thinking like, do you want to go the way of the NFL to where it's like you can't touch the quarterback, to where we can't have any contact at all, right? Like I played low-level college basketball. People do not take into account how much physicality is in a basketball game. These are 6'7", 6'8", well-conditioned athletes, right? Now, to that point, a guy like Giannis can take his gather step at the three-point line, take 2 steps, be within the free throw line, and dunk it every single time. Then it turns into an all-star game. Mm-hmm. So, like, what can the defense do? And I'll tell you why the charge thing kind of happened, right? This is what I remember. If you leave your feet, the ref's going to call it on you every time. So it was, okay, now you have to go establish position. But it used to be go establish position with your hands up. Now it's become go establish position with your arms down, to where guys like Steve Nash famously got caught by Kobe, a couple times, with his knees in Steve Nash's face. But Steve Nash was constantly like running under people. And that's where it gets dangerous. Now, what we saw, like with Kevin Love, that's a big dude that initiated kind of Anthony Davis. That was a big dude. I'm kind of stuck in the middle. Like, I don't think you can get rid of the charge rule because you have to give the defense some incentive to recover, right? Usually that person taking a charge is the secondary defender. They're sliding over. Otherwise, they're going to catch fouls all the time, or they're not going to help at all. And then it's just free lanes, and we're just watching an all-star game where it's dunk and three-point line all the time.
Yeah, I'm conflicted in that. I mean, what I've been liking about the playoffs so far is they're allowed to play a little more defense in the regular season. A lot more physicality. They're not getting called for all the ticky-tacky stuff. I'd like to see more of that during the regular season. I know. And so you're going to take one more tool away from the defense and make it even easier in the offense. So I totally see that point of view as well.
Yeah, that's the other thing is I think they need to coach offensive players a little bit, like guys like Ja have had such an athletic advantage their whole life. They are not used to college players being able to recover in time. But now at the pro level, these guys are able to catch up in time. And one of the things is, like, as an offensive player, you have a decision: shoot, pass, dribble, penetrate, right? Those are my three options. Usually that's dictated by you reading the defense. So, I remember when I would, I'd drive and I wouldn't get a call. And then, refs that I knew for a long time would be like, well, you went in there out of control. Like, that's the question. Did these guys go in and out of control? And, the Giannis one.
Something you said for that.
Yeah, I felt for that one because it is kind of in control. It's just like a weird, pun intended, freak accident that he kind of lands on his back that way.
And you're going to get some of those, right? I mean,
whereas Ja is kind of reckless. Ja goes in just, 100 miles an hour
for the air.
That's been talked about before. Like, can he stay healthy with being that reckless going into the paint?
Oh, that's what we used to talk about with D Rose for a very long time, right?
Very similar.
How long is that career going to last when that's your main method of scoring?
Right.
And then look what happened. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And Thibodeau drove him into the ground, but
as he does.
I know. What's wrong with 47 minutes a game? What?
It's great if you want to get paid. Like, if you're a player
right.
and you're looking for that second contract, like, hell yeah, Tibbs, play me. Get me all these minutes, I'll get paid, and then I will just completely fall apart, a la Joakim Noah.
Absolutely. Hey, the Knicks are loving him right now, though. I'll tell you what, that's a resurgent team, and I feel like he's a great coach for what they're doing right now. But I think you're right. In the long run, if he's got players that are up there, getting up there in age, playing the minutes he wants them to play, it can gets a little dicey. So, but I would just say on the charge thing too, man. I think we should just say it's a very hard thing to officiate.
Oh, it's the biggest gray area
it's a split second decision,
in sports,
right?
Yeah.
I mean, you have to be there looking at it and make a call on two guys who are making an athletic move. It's really hard to do. So I don't.
Maybe they should just make it some extra emphasis on penalty, where if a guy is leaving his feet, he's already gathered and he's leaving his feet, you can't slide in underneath him, just like you can't slide in now under somebody shooting the 3-pointer, right?
Right.
I mean,
you got to watch
should be a rule. I feel like that is part of the rule now. It's just not always officiated that way, right? In a bang play,
like a point of emphasis,
right.
Yeah. I used to always like defer to the offensive player. Like, if they've already left their feet, they've made their play known. I would rather the defensive player jump to challenge him.
Yeah,
right. Rather than
play.
slide in under them. Yeah, and that's where I think it's a hard thing for, like, let's say the baseline official is usually the one making that call. The baseline official usually is, here's a drive, here's a guy sliding. There's sometimes, and at least this was me in high school, like doing men's league game, I'm looking to see if the feet are outside that protected area. Right. I'm not necessarily watching what the gather looks like, what the upper body language is like. And the other thing too is a lot of offensive players lead with their arms. I think, not to be man, I'd hate to sound like the old dude, right? But you watch the offhand of a lot of these players, and I've even said, there's been dudes that have been caught by dunks. Watch that off arm. It's almost like the dunk contest. They're like pushing off of the defender. So I think that's like another bone of contention, but we probably don't care about it because it's to the offensive favor. So yeah, I'm with you. Like, the Steve Nash sliding under people after they've taken off, complete BS. I don't care how you set.
I mean, the leading with your arm, that's LeBron made a whole career off of that. Like, just the whole, lead with the arm and shove the guy back out of the way as you're driving to the hoop.
Well, look, I'm going to defend LeBron a little bit because that was my move. That was D Rose's move. And, it's not always the arm too; it's the shoulder.
It's not just.
He's a shoulder roll.
Yeah. And that's a big shoulder. Like,
Kobe would do that too, right? Shoulder roll. Yeah.
Create that separation. Absolutely.
Yeah. But no, I thought that was an interesting point about how you would look more at the feet to see about the restricted circle. And, you can't look at everything, right? You got to be going through 100 things in your head officiating. So,
and the hard thing is, like, even with the number of refs that are on the floor, they're not going to consult on every single play, right? Or go to replay on every play. So a lot of times, baseline official makes that call. Trailing official's not going to override or, hey, let's look at it differently, unless the person that made the call is asking for help. Like, oh man, I blew my whistle. Let's talk about it, right? But then we're slowing down the game even more.
Yeah. Gotcha.
All right. So the other notable incident from the first round so far is the Draymond Sabonis tangle and stomp.
Stompgate?
That happened last Stompgate. Oh, no. Did you just throw a gate on there? Oh.
I mean, everything's got a gate now. Yeah.
I know.
Oh, man.
It's a little goofy in that did they make the right call throwing Draymond out? Yeah, they did. But I think, Sabonis is like, I was trying to protect myself. It's like, this is on video. You literally curled your arm around his ankle to yank and hold him back. Don't act like you're innocent in this. That's,
Yeah, I'm really interested to get Matt's takes. We're a little biased. I mean, I think Jay's right. Draymond definitely deserved to get kicked out. I don't think he deserved his suspension. And according to Shams Charania, it seems like he's not going to get suspended for Game 3, which is a good thing, I think. I think him getting ejected was enough. But, it was an ugly play overall. I mean, Sabonis was doing it almost looked like he tried to take Klay Thompson down before that, kind of pulling him down. And that created the whole issue. It was like a flop. And then when he was on the ground, him trying to, get up or, whatever, he grabbed his leg. You can't say he didn't. So it's just a strange play. And Draymond always seems to be in these things. That's the problem.
Draymond always is in it. I know.
He doesn't get the benefit of the doubt because you're doing this every year, buddy. Like,
he actually had his ankle x-rayed today. Did you know that?
Well, I saw he was asking for one. I thought that was a little bit of a sportsmanship.
Some theater.
Yeah.
If he shows up in a walking boot, you know what his angle is going to be.
Right. Like LeBron and the cast after the final series. But what's your thoughts on it, Matt? I'm really interested to see what you think, being a former official and all that. So.
Well, the thing is, former official, whenever I listen to like Big Ten referees speak, like Big Ten referees around here in Chicago, the league conference offices are here, and when they talk about that, you know who the players are and what they're up to. And especially in a league like the NBA where those refs are tenured and Draymond's been around a while. Yeah, reputation precedes you a little bit. And I think one thing as a ref is you never want things to escalate too far. You never want them to go too big, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, you're talking to also a guy in Chicago who used to watch Dennis Rodman. And one of the great things about Dennis Rodman, similar to Draymond, is your rebounding and your defense is the key to what you contribute to the team. But if you can take the other team's second best offensive player out of the game, whether it's mentally or physically, you're doing your team a really good service. And I think that's been kind of like Draymond's thing a little bit. Like even Steven Adams, Steven Adams is the tertiary or the fourth option really on the Thunder. Like, let me give him a little gift down there. Right. It's kind of obvious, but look, maybe I get him so angry, he gets out of his head, he gets out of his game, and he throws everything off. And that's the thing is interesting thing for me is Draymond is such a well-spoken and intellectual guy. But on the court, is he really doing this out of emotion or is he doing this because it's planned? Right. And I kind of, it's interesting. Like I can get caught up in the heat of the moment. A lot of dudes that used to play basketball, we would say I got caught up in the heat of the moment a lot, maybe too much. So maybe it's two different guys, right? Like maybe you are a different person on the court. So, but yeah, you're right. Benefit of the doubt is not going to behoove him. And that's where I wonder, and I would ask you guys as Warrior fans, this is my own curiosity. Have you gotten tired of Draymond? Where he gets ejected and now potentially suspended, and it puts your season in jeopardy. Because we all know that Game 7 LeBron doesn't happen if he doesn't get suspended.
Right.
Yeah. I guess the answer for me would be, I don't know, he's like that friend of yours who's a little crazy, but he's like there for you and he's awesome, but occasionally he's just off the rails. But you love him regardless. You
want that guy on your team.
And you put up with it,
right.
So, it's frustrating. But and some Warriors fans, the bandwagoners, there's many now, are just like, oh, get rid of Draymond and stuff. And it's like, no way, dude. Like, if you rode through years of shit like we did, you're rolling with him. He was one of the guys who brought us back, So
100%.
That's kind of where I stand. I'm pretty sure that's where Tony stands.
Yeah, I don't think they win in any of the titles that we have without him. I mean, he's the anchor of the defense, right? He's, at times one of the only ones playing defense this year with all the struggles we've had. And I think the thing with him and his emotion is that that's part of who he is and how he's beneficial to your team, right? You kind of ride his emotion, and as he goes emotionally and like fires you up, that's how the team goes. Because the Warriors are kind of a soft-spoken, Steph Curry's not going to be out there screaming at other guys. He'll celebrate a little bit, and he can get fiery, but I feel like Draymond kind of stokes that fire in all of them, right? And
he's always been kind of the heart.
Yeah, I mean, Boston last year, they were really struggling when Draymond was struggling, right? And like mid-series, he kind of flipped that switch, and like, he's not able to do a lot of things, right? You're not going to him for offense. You're not, for scoring, I'll say. I think he does play a big part in the offense, passing, screening, like just a lot of the dirty
and when he
stuff,
does hit, it's a cherry on top. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just think, just to say get rid of him, or, I get annoyed with him too. I see these situations happen and I'm like, Draymond, chill. Draymond, cool out, cool down. Even last night I was saying, just relax, and then he's out there hyping the crowd up, and I mean, it's you got to roll with the guy. I mean,
honestly, the most that Tony and I get annoyed by Draymond is kissing LeBron's ass. He's been doing a lot of lately. That bothers us. It's like, come on, dude, you're still playing.
Is he trying to get a soft landing in Los Angeles? That's what I think about when he's doing that. I'm like, are you?
I don't know.
It's weird.
Clutch?
It's
are
weird.
You Clutch
it's
insider?
Weird, they were like, they were enemies, man. They were, like,
I know,
when he got suspended, like, it was like they couldn't stand each other. And like, that's what you want in like a rivalry, right? I mean, I guess they haven't had.
You get a little older.
For a little while. Yeah,
you get a little older. You get in your mid-30s and you get over that shit too.
Plus,
well, and you see the young guard,
business things. Yeah,
you see the young guard coming in, and you think, well, maybe our time is passing. Let's show some respect. I've always felt like it was And by the way, I'm a LeBron fan, right? I know it's crazy to be a Jordan fan and a LeBron fan. It's totally possible.
Not really.
Yeah.
But I always felt like it was like, hey, you know what? LeBron will call you the best team of all time and that he beat you guys, right? And that's like the compliment there. And then the compliment is, oh, yeah, you are the greatest player of all time. And no shame that we lost. We were all-time team that lost to the greatest player of all time. Do you guys know the Draymond Green, Tom Thibodeau Bulls relationship? You ever heard this?
I don't know if I do.
This was one of the beginning of so the GMs for the Bulls, Garpax as they were called, Foreman and John Paxson, they drafted Campaign. And Tom Thibodeau was very, very livid because Tom Thibodeau's top choice was Draymond Green. So anytime the Warriors would come to town, like Thibodeau would be swearing under his breath, like should have been ours.
Wow.
Yeah. So.
Okay.
That's a Draymond player, Thibodeau player.
I can see why Thibodeau would love Draymond. Yeah, that's cut from the same cloth right there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow. That's interesting.
Yeah, so, when you think about like what Joakim Noah was to the Bulls when they had their runs, kind of similar, right? Like flawed players that didn't have outside offensive games, but were energy, high motors.
Yeah, and I would say an even more elite defender than some of the I mean, Draymond, he talks himself up, but if you put him against, like, it's criminal. He has only one Defensive Player of the Year award. Like
1,000%.
Like he's, as your anchor, like you can have a weak defense around him, and
how many does Rudy Gobert have?
The fraud that is Rudy Gobert. Man, Minnesota just can't catch a break. They got caught up in the Jimmy Butler situation. Now they're caught up in the Rudy Gobert. How much did they give up for him?
Like 5 picks and some players.
That's going to go down as one of the worst
trades ever.
Yeah. I mean, the hard thing with Minnesota is, okay, we can't get enough 3-point shooting. We're never going to attract free agents. Let's just double down and get we'll make Karl Anthony Towns our 3-point specialist, and we'll make Rudy Gobert the cleanup guy down low. And it's just and there's something to be said about the maturity of that team. Like how about Mike Conley, right? Like, oh man, we can't just go back and play. Like, did Cat actually do that on purpose when he came out for his press conference and said, "Hey, Call of Duty coming up"?
I don't know. Half the stuff he does, I'm just like, and I get it. Like, it must be tough. It seems like nobody likes him, right? On Utah, like, he had the issues with Donovan Mitchell, and then he's going there and getting in fights in Minnesota. It's just like, I feel for the guy,
And now Mitchell is flourishing in Cleveland, too.
Right.
That's the other,
It's kind of evident who the real star of that thing was.
Yeah.
I think Quinn Snyder, he's going to be a hell of a coach wherever he ends up because
he's in Atlanta. He's in Atlanta.
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm
They brought
sorry.
him at the very end of the season. It was like 18 games left. They brought him in.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
He's doing
Yeah.
good. Yeah,
Yeah.
I like him as a coach a lot. So, but
Yeah.
I just imagine him pulling his hair out, dealing with that
He's
whole.
super smart. He's Quinn was my a friend of mine, his college roommate, and like he says he's just super smart.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, super respected coach around the league. I'm glad he's going to get another shot.
Hey, but you know what? I'm a Minnesota fan because they took 2 point guards, which allowed us to take Steph Curry. So,
Ricky Rubio, Johnny Flynn.
shout out Minnesota.
The best thing Minnesota ever did was those Prince uniforms, and they only lasted a year.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, the purple and pink things. Like, how did Nike not make that a regular thing?
Man.
Oh, since you're into apparel and the SwooshLife podcast and all that, I gotta say for NBA uniforms, the Kings black unis with like the subtle pattern in it are amazing. Those
Fire.
are such great uniforms.
Yeah.
I gotta tip my cap.
I
on
like
that
their
one.
whole branding. I like what they're doing.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah,
Like the
agreed.
beam, all the stuff they're doing is cool.
I do have a soft spot in my heart for the Kings because we all know they should have had an NBA championship.
Yeah.
Them or the Trailblazers.
Oh yeah, they're our second favorite team. If the Kings do beat the Warriors, then we're running with the Kings.
Okay, so
talking
you
about,
guys are.
I went to a couple
2002?
Kings games this year.
You guys
Yeah,
are
no,
all-
like I like the Kings.
okay.
Again, I
Even for
went
kicking
to,
out
2
E40,
Kings
they
games
kicked
this
out
year.
E40.
What were they thinking about?
I mean,
Yeah, that
we grew up right, and where I live right now is equidistant between the two teams.
Oh, okay.
So yeah,
You're right in the middle.
Sacramento's
Yeah,
really
I mean,
close.
and it sounds like you guys go way back, right? So, like, I really respect the real Warriors fans that have been there like a really long time.
yeah.
Like,
we went through all the hard times.
yeah, even like
Yeah.
I know guys that were going back to the Run TMC era, right? Like,
That's when I
Yep,
started watching. Yep.
Yep.
yeah, dude,
Well,
I love
okay,
those teams.
Let me put this in context for you. I was super excited in '94 when we drafted Joe Smith first overall.
Oh, I had this poster on my wall. Yeah, dude. Yes. Yeah. So, like, yeah, I think we went, and that's what I think people don't realize about Warriors fans, because they get a lot of grief. Oh, you guys are front runners. You do all this winning. We were horrible. We were the king, that big drought. You know what I mean? We were the Knicks who have been horrible for a long time. I mean, terrible 20 win years. And they still came out kind of like how they said the Kings fans are, loyal fans. That was the Warriors fans. So like to get rewarded like we have with with all the championships, it's like.
And you guys would get bright spot players every once in a while. Like, you had Jason Richardson for a little bit, but then
That was my guy.
That was it.
Yeah.
That was him.
Yep.
Monta Ellis, right? Like, you guys just had like one dude, right?
Yeah.
Because Ellis was around for the beginning of Steph, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah,
In
first
fact,
year.
it was trade Ellis away, bring in Bogut, and give the team to Steph. That
It
was,
was
the
very
big-
contentious when Steph came in because Monte
Growing up-
said we can't play together. That's what Monte said during
Yep.
training camp. During training camp,
Right.
it's like, oh,
Yeah, and growing up, my guy was Moley, Chris Mullen.
yeah,
That was my guy. Yeah.
I was a Mitch Richmond guy.
I like Richmond too, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of
He has
course,
that-
Tim Hardaway from Chicago. So,
Yeah.
Oh,
right.
do you think of Tim Hardaway more as a Warrior or as a Miami Heat?
Warriors.
Warriors.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's where he became big, right? And that's where
That's where he cut
been
his
into
teeth.
killer crossover and
Yeah.
it's got to be.
So,
Warriors.
so Matt, you being 40, so you grew up prime Chicago Bulls. Like that's some getting spoiled right there at the gates, right?
It was spoiled, but I'll tell you that I wasn't into basketball or sports until the second 3P. So
Really?
one of my earliest basketball memories is John Paxson hitting the 3-pointer like in my uncle's basement. Like, we're at a party and John Paxson hits that 3-pointer to beat the Suns for the first 3P.
Mhm.
And I didn't think much of it. And my cousin did take me out. So I was like 10 years old at the time. And I'm out like partying at night, like after the second championship. So I was like, oh, Bulls are cool. And then like the next year came around, watched the Paxson thing. I'm like, oh, this Bulls thing is cool. And then all of a sudden Michael Jordan retired. And I was like, oh, is this still cool? Like I didn't know, like I just wasn't into basketball at the time. And then I started like really playing basketball, and I was like, man, we had a really good player, this Michael Jordan guy. And
This guy.
yeah. So I wasn't into like at the time I was more into like football and Deion Sanders. Like I always tell people Deion Sanders is the guy that got me into sneaker collecting, because that was like the first signature shoe I had, the Diamond Turf. Because I got it at a Nike outlet.
Wow.
The Diamond Turf 2 was out. I was able to get the one. My dad got me the one for $40 instead of the 2.
Nice.
But it was still Diamond Turf.
So, we had Dion out here in San Francisco for one season, and I still say it's maybe the best defensive player season in history. He had 6 interceptions, 3 touchdowns, 300-something yards, and he only allowed 5 receptions on the season. Ridiculous.
I'm telling you, people do not put enough respect on that team. Right? Because they played the Chargers in the Super Bowl, blew them out. I still say Steve Young should still be, like, I know Mahomes and Peyton Manning and Tom Brady, like they're going to push like this whole thing to another level. But at the time, everybody's like, who's the greatest, quarterback of all time? I'm like, Steve Young for a long time had the highest passer rating of all time, right? Like that was an immense team. And you know what? Like I was watching
Montana before him. Yeah.
Yeah. So I always tell people, like, sometimes old video makes people look slower than they are. Watch Jerry Rice videos. When he first got with the 49ers, dude was unbelievable how fast he was. Then watch Jerry Rice versus Deion Sanders, Atlanta Falcons, right? Like they have a highlight tape of that, and then realize how fast Deion was. Just how fast he was that he could keep up with Jerry Rice, and that they would.
Well, I mean, that's why he brought up the Deion, the high step,
Yes.
Yeah, because he's like, I have so much time here to beat you that I can just mess around.
I loved him on the 49ers, and then I ended up getting a Cowboys jersey when he went to Jerry World, So like,
Matt, don't tell us that.
I know, but I was a Bears fan. The Bears were awful.
That's
I'm
true.
like, Deion's like an all-time athlete, like all-time athlete.
It sounds funny to say, but I think Deion's underrated. It's odd to say, but he kind of is in a weird way. He gets forgotten about a little bit.
I just think people don't really remember him, right? Unless you're of a certain age, right? You don't remember how good he was and how dominant he was,
right?
Because now you're looking at people who are in the league now and even more recently, but he was a beast, man.
I would say that is the idea that he was underrated is not an unfair statement. I feel like he doesn't get talked about enough, and I think maybe it is because for such a long time as a player, he did pump himself up. He's the ultimate self promoter. He was fantastic at it. So maybe like the guys that are our age, they don't talk about it enough, just how great he was. They don't. So I think it could be fair in that assessment.
So I want to kind of shift gears for a little bit. So Matt, I'd like to hear about the Swoosh Life, how you got so hardcore into Nike apparel, and I guess it's pretty golf specific in the apparel, but not entirely. And let us know how that got going.
Yeah. So the podcast was started 3 years ago by a friend of mine named Nick Spears and Gumby, Ryan Henry, Gumby, we call him Gumby. And he was a super fan for Syracuse basketball for a very long time. And we just kind of like, I started golfing in my mid-20s, right around Tiger's, kind of like the Hank Haney era of Tiger's career, right? So I was not really aware of Butch Harbin Tiger. That's like the first 7 majors, let's say, right? And then like all of a sudden I'm like, this is an all-time thing happening. I'm in golf, and I was lucky enough to work for Nike during kind of those later years of Tiger's dominance, right? So I got to work for it. Ryan got to work for it, and our other co-host this year, Keith, got to work for it. And it's just something that we never felt like Nike ever got respect in the golf space. So there was always like kind of these rumblings like, well, it's just Tiger that wins with these clubs. And then never mind the fact that Michelle Wie won a major, Lucas Glover, Trevor Immelman, all these other really good, Rory McIlroy, all these guys are winning with Nike clubs. We're like, man, we always felt like disrespected in the golf space a little bit, but we also felt like there was a changing of the guard where around 2010, 2013, Nike and Tiger started to really change. We always talked about Tiger being an athlete, and we saw more and more golfers becoming athletes, and we saw more athletes becoming comfortable, Michael Jordan included, saying, yeah, this is what I do in my free time. Like it was evident in The Last Dance. So 3 years ago, they started the podcast. And then last year, Gumby asked myself and Keith to join in on the podcast. And really the idea behind the SwooshLife Podcast is we are sneaker lovers. Like, we have sneaker collections beyond the golf, but we want to bring this to the golf world, and we still want to keep that like spirit of Nike Golf, even though they don't make hard goods anymore. We just want to keep that alive. And we found there's just an amazing group of people. Like, we have folks that, you know, we want to trade old clubs. We want to trade old pieces of apparel. We talk about the new apparel coming up. Nike does a special drop for all the majors recently for the Masters. I know we're going to talk a little bit about the Masters, a little foreshadowing. They did an awesome pack about around the Georgia Peaches. And, you know, it's scuffed up suede on the shoe. It's unbelievable, like the artistry that is in a shoe. So some of you guys are probably like, oh my God, another sneaker weirdo. But they really are like pieces of art on our feet, and we appreciate that. And the cool thing about, you know, like tonight's podcast, we're going to be recording after this. We are going to talk actually NBA playoffs. We're going to talk about the Ja Morant 1 coming out. You know, we're going to talk about signature shoes, the state of that. There's a whole sneaker culture that's, you know, lends itself outside of golf. We kind of focus on golf because it's a really fun topic. And, you know, Tiger's the one that really, you talked about MJ, like behind MJ, probably the next most transformational athlete of all time is Tiger Woods.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Yeah. Well, so that's funny. I'll give you my background a little bit. So I started golfing at 10, played pretty competitively for a stretch through junior golf, through high school. Hurt my back and couldn't play in college. Had to take a couple years off, and then I've been playing consistently ever since. You know, back in the day, I was a Titleist guy. Actually, still am a Titleist guy. I was not a big fan of the Nike clubs, but the Nike All Pro, the Pro Tour golf ball.
Yep.
That was my favorite golf ball, and I played that from like the year it came out, and then once they said they were going to discontinue it, I bought like 10 boxes.
Hell yeah.
Wow. And that lasted for a while. I wish I had bought more. And like, cause I love that golf ball. And especially it's so iconic with 16 Tiger's chip on 16 at the Masters, hanging on the edge of the hole, you know, sitting there with the logo and it drops in. And it makes me sad that golf ball is not around anymore. So, like, I understand why Nike got rid of the hard goods, but like, why not keep the ball?
So fun fact about that one is that the reason Tiger signed with Bridgestone, the factory that manufactured the Nike golf balls was a Bridgestone factory, right? And the gentleman that used to design Nike golf balls, his name is Rock Ishii. And see, this is the kind of like really nitty gritty detail stuff we cover in the podcast.
Yeah, that's it.
I know that name. Yeah.
Rock Ishii now works for Callaway Golf. So if you're looking for maybe a similar golf ball. Now, one of the things, Jay. Like you mentioned, you're a Titleist guy. Like that's what we would feel when we went out to private clubs. So like private clubs, and at the time, like there wasn't like, when we first started like in golf clubs, and I say we still as if I'm not affiliated with Nike, we're just a fan podcast. But when I was working for Nike, yes, there were big boxes like Golfsmith. You guys had Edwin Watts and stuff like that. But primarily, the club is where, you know, the guy that buys a driver every year, he belongs to a country club. The guy that buys new irons every few years, he belongs to a country club. He wants custom options. He wants fancy stuff. And a lot of those relationships are cultivated from the teaching pro at the club. So, hey, we're
Definitely.
a Titleist club. We are a TaylorMade club. We're a Pink club, a Callaway club. Here's Nike as an upstart. And we were always fighting uphill just to get people to consider us, right? And
I can see that.
Yeah. So, and that's where like we all have like this camaraderie, us former employees or people that did take the plunge and started playing some of the stuff. And you're like, oh my gosh, this stuff was good. You know, fun fact, Louis Oosthuizen, when he won his major at St. Andrews, he's sponsored by Ping. His 3-wood and 5-wood were Nike SQ fairway woods. The same ones that Tiger wouldn't take out of his bag for years and years and years, right? So it's like, you know, people keep telling us we make garbage, but man, a lot of dudes like putting it in the bag. So,
yeah, I was always surprised they just folded up shop so quickly like that. I mean, I guess it was a process, but
well, it was sudden. I will say that. Like, I still remember where I was. I was in an airport, and when I was doing demo tech, and we call them demo techs, like the people that go and fit you for clubs. Maybe you're not the full-time sales rep. You're a demo tech. You go and you do the club fitting.
Yeah.
And, you know, and that's something that I really enjoyed. People are like, wait, you work on the weekends? You have a second job? I'm like, yeah. Cause like, you know, I still do it for TaylorMade. And I had a guy last week that came back and he goes, hey, you fit me for my irons last year. I go, great. How did they go? He goes, I played Myrtle Beach and I shot a 40 on the back 9. I love it. You know, he's like ecstatic, right? Like we changed his hobby and stuff like that. So I live for that kind of stuff a little bit. So I guess I'm a people pleaser in a way, but yeah. So as far as like the Nike club thing, it was sudden, but it was also a thing where Nike kind of demands excellence, right? Like they could drop one pair of these shoes and it'll sell out. Like these Jordan 1s over my shoulder, they will sell out. And it's like, wait a minute, like we dominate footwear and apparel. It's such an uphill climb. And if you take a look at the golf industry, TaylorMade is owned by another company. Titleist is owned by a Acushnet and
Acushnet, FootJoy. Yeah.
The one brand, the two brands that do own themselves and are killing it are Ping and Callaway. Callaway is just out of the stock prices to the moon because they've bought Topgolf. They've also identified that the future is not in hard goods; it's in the experience of Topgolf and going and as my co-host Gumby has said, it's bowling for golf, right? Like instead of pins, you're hitting into holes, but you can stand and have a good meal.
I'm going to be in Vegas next Sunday, Monday. We're going to win the Topgolf Monday night in Vegas. Yeah. So
if you're Nike and you kind of see that future where it's more about the experience and you already dominate apparel and hard goods. And that's the reason they're able to get a Tony Finau, because then Tony goes with Ping, right? They're able to sign. They're able to keep Tony, Tiger, and Rory happy, and they go and sign with TaylorMade. So it made more sense. The golf industry, and if you look at what Adidas did, Adidas spun off TaylorMade Golf because it just didn't make sense to, like, for lack of a better term, own the player head to toe. Meaning, like, oh, if you're an Adidas guy, you're a TaylorMade guy. I see the awesome hat. Looks like you're I don't want to break my news, but yeah, you got a sweet hat going on. There's all kinds of cool niche golf brands doing really cool things, right? And I think maybe Nike saw that in the future, and they're like, well, we can't just hitch our wagons to the clubs.
Yeah, I can see that. I always wonder if Nike would consider coming back, but maybe under like a subsidiary, like a different brand name, because like you've seen PXG take off, for example, in recent years, and those are crazy expensive. So I was always wondering if Nike might launch a brand under another name actually and get back into that business.
It's interesting because so more Nike history for y'all. They bought Converse. They bought Converse, so they kind of did that, but it fit what they did. It was footwear in the casual and basketball space. Okay, and I believe Draymond's a Converse athlete. Now they go and they had Cole Haan. So for those of you that know Cole Haan dress shoes, they had Cole Haan for a little bit, and they ended up saying, well,
really, like
dress shoes is not our thing. So like, why do we have it? And they sold that off. And I don't know if that was during the Mark Parker era or not, but it was kind of like, okay, so it doesn't speak to our core philosophy, right? Like they used to be in hockey and they bought Bauer for a little bit, and then they kind of sold that off and they said, look, hard goods might not be our thing, right? Like we'd rather be the shoe of choice for the skateboarder, not necessarily the skateboard of choice for the skateboarder. And same thing, right? Like, and I'll tell you, I worked for Wilson Sporting Goods. I've got an interesting history, y'all. Hard goods is a grind. It's a very competitive market, whether it's tennis rackets or golf equipment, it's pretty tough and the margins are not that great.
Yeah. The production cost is definitely much higher than apparel, Yep.
1,000%. Tons of R&D, tons of that stuff. So yeah, that's why we're able to see so many like Nike athletes at Augusta, at the Masters, right? Like they can play whatever they want. And the other thing too is like, when we called it the summer of Nike, we had Molinari won a major, Brooks started his run, and a lot of those guys were doing it with mixed bags. So like once they didn't have to have, 14 Nike clubs, some of them had like Mizuno irons or like a Callaway putter or, I think it was a Toulon or an Odyssey, or Bettinardi putter for Molinari and his wins. Right? Like when those guys started to be able to play what they wanted, all of a sudden they started scoring better. So I also tell people like, you don't have to have a full bag of just one brand, right? Like play what's right for you.
Nice. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, especially between irons and woods, but it's whatever, suits your eye too, And
I'll tell you, there's some companies that, I would say my brother works in the golf industry full time. And like two of the top brands, one is one I worked for, Wilson, right? Not necessarily known for making great fairway woods, but they make great irons. And Mizuno, like Mizuno irons, they're beautiful irons. They play really well. And
they're the nicest looking irons for sure.
1,000%, well, and they have that grain flow forging process that's proprietary, right? Like that's something that's special to them. So it's like, okay, they make a good driver. They don't, but it's okay. They know that, hey, this is our lane, and again, it speaks to companies kind of knowing their lane and they're like, okay, this is what we do best and this is what we want to do.
Nice.
Cool. Well, so I did want to dip into a little bit. I want to talk about the Masters, but before we get into the Masters, briefly, we won't deep dive this. What are your thoughts on LIV golf?
It's a topic that we've talked about multiple times, right? And I think it's hard to not deep dive about LIV. Sorry if that. I'll try and keep this to 60 seconds.
I know.
No.
Well, I didn't mean. Yeah, you can go longer.
Yeah,
than that.
no.
Anyway,
it's a good conversation because at the beginning it was kind of like this moral thing and like maybe like a patriotic thing of like, okay, like PGA is an American nonprofit, like very high level American nonprofit versus a foreign backed thing that wants to be a competitor to them, right? Okay. Mm-hmm. So then you go to the next level and it's like, well, you can understand why, you know, a guy like Ian Poulter, Lee Westwood, and even like a Nike guy like Paul Casey who's having back issues, like, you know what?
Guys in their mid-40s.
Yeah, like, you know what? I'm probably leaving the tour anyways in a couple of years. I won't be able to keep my card. I might as well go get paid for this new tour.
Get paid.
Don't blame him. Bryson DeChambeau had an injury going on. Phil, you know, yes, he had just won the PGA over Brooks. That's where it starts to get weird for people is, you know, Phil Mickelson. My relationship with Phil Mickelson as a Tiger Woods fan has evolved over time, right? Like, so you think about the time I got into golf, it's Tiger versus Phil, right? So I'd come in after the Tiger versus David Duval era, and now it's like Tiger fans and Phil fans, okay? And you can only be one or another. I'm like, I don't think there's anything wrong with Phil. He wears aviators. He gives you a thumbs up. He does crazy flop shots. He's got a sweet short game, like has this big, long, loopy backswing, kind of like mine. I like Phil Mickelson. He wins you over. And he was poised, Phil Mickelson, and I think, here's the thing, he's like the biggest player name, right, outside of Greg Norman, the CEO. And the thing that people can't seem to understand is, hey, you were set to be the next Arnold Palmer. If Tiger was going to be Jack Nicklaus, right, like best of his era, best of his generation, perhaps greatest of all time, perhaps he is, right, greatest of all time golfer, you were next. You were Arnold Palmer. You had the next most majors, endorsement deals, talking, fan favorite. You had it all, and you traded it in to get more. And in this era where people are getting laid off, inflation has prices going high, the wars all over the place, like the world seems a little crazy, and you had everything, and you decided to you know, I get it. Good opportunity, right? So that's one thing. Then the next step was, but then you said, hey, I'm leaving because the PGA does this, and that. No bueno. Don't like you guys. A couple weeks later, you're like, hey, PGA, I'm suing you. You got to let me play. Right? Like, could you imagine quitting a place of work, getting a new job with way more money, and then walking back and being like, yeah, and I want to get paid from you too.
That's wild.
I know.
So that's what it was for us. That was the hypocrisy for us, like on the podcast. We were like, that just didn't sit right. Now, there are guys that we respect because they were straight up. Like Brooks was like, hey, man, it's a good opportunity. I'm out, right? Dustin Johnson
in
full swing
with it.
If anybody said you could work the same job, less of it for more money, we'd all take it. Cool.
We sign up. Yeah.
He even took his name off the lawsuit to try and get back in. So it's like, oh, and then Harold Varner III, Jordan athlete, we absolutely love what he said at the Masters. He's like, look, when these guys, when my fellow LIV people tell you, and I'm paraphrasing, by the way,
growing the game.
Yeah, growing the game. Shut up. Like, you're not growing the game. Like, you took the money and now you want to double dip. And that's the other thing is, yes, there's no cuts on LIV. They get paid regardless. But, you know, you've quoted Twitter a couple times, and I'll bring up the guy. I'll look it up. In this lawsuit, one of the things that happened is the judge ruled that details of LIV contracts can come out. Mm-hmm. And there's a great guy on Twitter, and I'll try and find it for you guys before we end, but he actually started going.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
And basically the stuff you accuse the PGA of doing, LIV kind of has that in their contracts too.
Wow.
It might actually be more restrictive than the PGA's contract.
Exactly.
That's the crazy part.
And you see the Masters, like these guys showed up to the Masters wearing their logos. Patrick Reed is sponsored by LIV straight across. So I think it was naive of LIV fans to say the PGA should let them in. Really? You would let somebody, like, it's obvious it's only 12 events. It's only 12 events this year. Like, those guys are businessmen. There's no way they're going to pay all you guys that money and not try and make their money back. And
Right.
I think their end goal is to be the premier tour in the world. So I don't blame the PGA Tour for saying, yeah, we kind of don't want you showing up with LIV logos and kind of doing an NWO action on, on our green. I love what Fred Ridley, from the Masters said. He's like, yeah, Greg Norman, we didn't invite you because we wanted this to be our tournament, not your tournament. And by the way, you've been invited 10 years in a row and you've only showed up twice. So we probably don't need you here this year.
Yeah, I'm not going to fault any of the players for taking the money, especially the guys who were injured. I think Koepka has real regret now because he was injured and he was worried about his future earning potential, and now he's healthy and playing well. But I'm not going to fault anyone for taking the money and doing what they feel they need to do for their family. But spare us the propaganda.
That's it.
Just don't give us the propaganda. You're not growing the game. And also Saudi Arabia, no, they haven't changed. Like spare us. Just,
and recent events have shown that.
Right.
Yeah, I know.
They're not our friends.
So to me, that's the insulting part. Just say it was too much money. I couldn't turn it down. I'll respect that. That's fine.
So I have a question. I know, Tony, you said that you're not a big golf guy. And I asked this of my buddy, Jason Goff. He hosts the Full Go podcast, pre and post game show host for the Chicago Bulls. I asked him this on his podcast, and I'd love to hear your reaction to it because he knows golf. So I put this in basketball terms. Let's say that a new league, we will take the country out of it, but a new league just said, hey, basketball players, we're going to sign Steph, Clay. Yeah, LeBron, you're getting a little old. Why don't you come on over? We'll give you $1 billion like we offered Tiger Woods, right?
Mm-hmm.
$1 billion league. And guess what? 82 games, too much. Too much. Best of 7 series, too much. We'll just run an NCAA style tournament. We'll go over 2 weeks, and we'll do it twice a year. There will be a spring session and a winter session. Would you think that's good for the game? Would you be pumped to watch that? Oh, and by the way, you know what? 4 quarters, too much. Too much.
Right.
3 quarters.
3 quarters.
Right.
No, not 4 rounds. 3 rounds. Would you watch? Would you be interested?
Would I watch? Yeah, I mean, I'd probably watch it.
He
I
would
don't think
watch
it'd
if Steph went. If
right,
Steph went.
Well, no, I don't. Would I think it'd be good for the NBA? No, not necessarily. Right? I mean, I don't know. But I mean, yeah, it's the whole thing when Jay explained it to me and just the whole process of it. It's just messy, in my opinion. Right? It doesn't look good on either end, and I understand why some of the guys do it, like you guys said. But yeah, I can see why the PGA would be upset for sure.
And I'm not here to defend the PGA, by the way, because I don't think the PGA is like perfect in any ways. We've
Right.
talked about it. Their FedEx Cup playoffs, and maybe Brooks is healthy because he doesn't have to play every single week in some 4-round tournament, right? Like to keep his card and all this. And we've discussed it too, like the OWGR, the rankings. It's a little bit of an antiquated system, but it still is the system. And now the LIV golfers are like, well, if I don't get my ranking points, I can't be in majors. Well, well, maybe
Those
your
rules
tournament could change their rules to match.
Right.
And not to mention, those rules were in place already. It's not like they just dropped them in after the fact. It's like that was already laid out that way.
I feel like somebody said, "Here's
qualifies.
$100 million." They all said yes, and they're like, "Oh wait, but do I get to play the Masters still?
How do I-
Can I still go to the Can I still do the PGA Championship
After they signed, right?
Can I do the U.S. Open?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And the guys who have exemptions should be allowed to play as they are. You
Yeah.
know,
Interesting
for
thing
like winning
is
past events and
Nick Spears, who I mentioned, he was the first year co-host of the podcast. He was at the Masters Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And one of the things we asked him was, what was the vibe? Was it like NW, like was it WCW versus WWE? Was it like, hey, let's go LIV or let's go PGA, right? Like one over the other. And he said, no. And we were talking off air, and one of the things that we posited is because I think when people have to turn in their cell phones, they live in the moment, and they were either rooting for Brooks or they're rooting for Rahm. They weren't necessarily like caught up. And I think technology has a way of kind of polarizing us. And we know, like I try to stay off Twitter, but Twitter only amplifies the loudest, most extreme voices. And,
Right.
like there's this happy medium. And even Rory has said like, yeah, I saw Brooks the other day, I saw Cam Smith the other day. Like, we say hi to each other. We don't like not talk to each other and things.
Mortal enemies. Right?
Honestly, I think there's been so much back and forth that they're just exhausted, both sides, about it. They're just like, let's just move on. Like, I think they're just tired.
Yeah, and that's again why I don't blame the PGA for not letting those guys back in, because if those guys were in these tournaments, it would be a talking point every single week. Like you made your decision. Please move on.
I will say the Masters did feel like a bit of a moral victory for LIV. Phil Mickelson going lights out on Sunday, finishing second.
Yeah.
Out of nowhere, and he'd been playing like dog shit for months. Wow. And then Koepka, ironically hitched his wagon to Greg Norman and then has a 12, goes 12 under the first 2 rounds. The only golfer in history to go 12 under the first 2 rounds and not win a major twice was Greg Norman, and now the third is Koepka. That's brutal. Like, it's a little poetic.
It's wild when those stats
he was in the mix.
It's wild when those stats line up, and I'm a huge Brooks fan. He plays quickly. I was totally rooting for him when he ripped Patrick Cantley very nicely. Didn't call him out by name, but just said, "Hey, we were waiting 7 hours." I don't know if the waiting kind of affected him. It was a brutally slow round. There's a whole thing right now when it comes to slow golf, and there has been for a while. But yeah,
huge pet peeve of mine. Like, ready golf, hit the ball. You don't need 5 practice swings. It kills me.
I'll tell you one thing. I went to so in my sales career, I won a contest and I got to go to Tiger Jam, which is Tiger's charity tournament in Las Vegas. And we got to go to a clinic with Dave Stockton, and Dave Stockton was kind of like a short game guru at the time. Like, he was coaching Rory, and I think he had developed, that kind of clock system with Phil. And he asked somebody, "Hey, who wants to try a 10-foot putt in front of me and I'll evaluate your routine," right? So the guy walks up, he volunteers. He's like, "Yeah, man, let me do it." Right. So he goes behind the ball, goes behind the hole, goes to the left of the ball, the right of the ball, walks around. After about like a full minute, he does sink the 10-footer. So congratulations. And Dave goes, "Well, you made the putt, but you put us all to sleep. Don't need that much time." He goes, "Walk behind the ball, walk towards the hole, and walk on the low side, and just go putt.
Shoot the shot.
The more you think about it, the worse it's going to get." And you can see sometimes with like Cantley, like, it's a little brutal. The aim point thing, I think, might have to get stopped at some point, just because it takes up way too much time. And yeah, to your point, it is a pet peeve, because if you talk about like, I love this game so much. I started in my late 20s. I loved it so much. I work in the industry part-time, right? I have 2 kids. Like, I have no time. And, I give up my Saturdays sometimes to work these events. I love the industry so much, but the number one complaint is I don't have the time. And especially like on a Saturday, when all of a sudden it becomes a 5.5, 6 hour round. Brutal. Absolutely brutal. And the other thing too, I think, is,
"Honey, I'm going golfing. It's like 4 hours for a round."
Oh, no.
It's going to be like 6,
No, listen, if any of our wives are listening to this podcast, we actually mean times 2. So anything we're saying here, it is 10 hours for a round of golf. What are you talking about?
Come on, Jay.
And that's why I think like weeknight 9-hole golf is unbelievable. Like, that's what I live for. Honestly, that's why, like, I don't even golf on Saturdays. That's why I would rather work as a fitter on a Saturday than go golfing and dedicate, this whole amount of my time. Like, I'd rather go after work. I have a great course right by work. I have a course here by my house, and I can get 9 holes done in an hour and a half. And it feeds the juices, right? So, and I'll get out with my buddies every once in a while. But yeah, don't be afraid to try 9 holes, y'all. Or, some of this new stuff like the Pop Stroke that's coming up, or Top Golf.
Well, Matt, you're not going to like this, but so the greatest extravagance of my life, about 7 years ago, I joined our local country club.
Yeah.
And I can go in the afternoon, like maybe after this podcast, and go get 18 in like 2.5 hours.
So another reason I give up my weekends is because I get to make connections and I get to play at country clubs every once in a while. So yeah, a country club, like, I get it, because a country club, even on the weekend, you're probably looking at 4.5 hours max, right? Like, but if you go to a public course, that's when you're starting to look at those 5 hour, 6 hour rounds. And I just don't see like how that's beneficial to anybody, like how anybody enjoys that at all.
Yeah,
unless you really hate
you feel like
family.
you're getting iced. Yeah, you feel like
Right.
Yeah.
You need that getaway, right?
You feel like you're getting ice between every shot on waiting that long. It's horrible.
1,000%. And
That's
I
slow.
also I suffer from a bad back, so I use that as my excuse for not taking practice swings. I'm probably one of the quicker golfers you'll ever play with because I don't practice swing. Like I'm just like, you know what, it is what it is at this point. Like
that's like me. You should come out to Sonoma and come play. That's exactly me.
Oh,
I get around quick.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. Yeah, 1,000%. Because I'm like, look, I'm going to take my 100 shots, but I'm going to take them quickly.
That would be fun. We should schedule that sometime, man. Do a little Sonoma trip.
Yeah, I did. As I told you guys before the show, I went to Manteca earlier this year. Definitely, I still hit in and out 3 times that trip. I think once a day. Dude, you can't beat it for under $10. I really hope you guys get sponsored. I hope you guys at least get a gift
I know
card on this.
Yeah, we should definitely tag them in this, I think. Oh man.
All right, I have one last question before we wrap this up. Matt, how many pairs of shoes do you own?
So this is an answer that nobody ever believes. I'm probably around 50 non-golf shoes and probably around 30 golf shoes. And people are like, sure, you host a Nike podcast. You've been doing this for so long. And I'm a big proponent of wear your kicks. Wear your kicks. And I don't have a ton of space.
I like that.
Yeah, I don't have a ton of space. So one thing I do is like, if the shoes are like halfway worn and I just know I will never wear them again, I go to Goodwill. I go to Goodwill, or, I might trade them with somebody, lightly used. Because, us sneakerheads, we don't really like wear these out. But I'll tell everybody a story. So one of my first jobs was working for the Chicago Park District as a ball field laborer was the official title. So I was the guy that laid off the softball things when you guys filled up the park on the 4th of July. I'm the guy who cleaned everything up. And one of the guys that ran the park who got me the job, a guy by the name of Dan Reamer, he was a basketball ref. So he reffed my basketball games when I was playing in men's leagues and things like that. So, we started working together, and he started noticing my shoes. He's like, you like sneakers? Dan's a big guy, 6'5", like very large man, takes his family to Disney, very nice guy. And he's like, dude, I have a pair of 1993 Jordan 3. So they retroed the Jordan 3 in 93.
Wow.
He goes, I got 3 pairs of these. I'm not going to wear them all because I keep buying
I had those.
Do you?
I had them.
And so I bought them, and I was making like $6 an hour. I bought them with like my second paycheck. I was like, Dan, I got to save up a little bit, and I kept them. And every Thanksgiving, I go to my parents' house and I check in my room. And Christmas, I go check in my room and I go look at them. And one year I go to check on them and the heel has completely disintegrated. And I'm not talking about soul separation. I'm talking about it is just caved in.
Crumbling.
Wow.
Yeah, like it's a mule now, right? Like it's a croc almost. And think about that. I never got to wear it. I never got to like for those of you that read my writing, if you read my whiskey writing or you follow my whiskey reviews, like I'm a big proponent of like give people their flowers while they're here. I just lost a friend on last Tuesday.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
Thank you. Like beautiful soul, Jason Shaw, and man, just a beautiful dude. And I'll tell you, like I never hesitated to tell him every time, like, dude, you're awesome. Like, dude, you are awesome, because you just never know when's like the next time you're gonna see somebody. So wear your shoes. I got the collection up here, and like, yeah, once I think that I'm not going to like be able to use them, I'd rather sell them to somebody that's going to enjoy them, or if they're not desirable, I go out to Goodwill and I give it to them. So I'm a big promote. That's the reason I'm like, wear your shoes. So, and
it's drink your whiskey too, right? I think we deal with that in the whiskey industry, right? People got our hoarders and don't want to open their bottles up. Man, it's about the experiences. Yeah, I completely agree.
I agree. I have like a hard time too, because some of that stuff, like the amount of money. Like I have more valuable bottles of whiskey than I do like super rare Jordans, right? Just
right.
I still regret all the Kobe's that I've given and traded away, right? Like if I held on to those. But, I passed them on to a college friend of mine who moved out to California. And guess what? He loves Kobe. He named his son Kobe, right?
See, there you go. So he appreciates it.
Oh, that was worthy.
Yeah. So that was worthy. I still kind of wish I had those Sunshine Adidas ones. But either way, Joe, you owe me. But absolutely, and when we talk about the whiskey, like the value has just gone up so crazy. But then you
absurd.
wonder, in 20 years, like, so the whiskey industry, 20 years ago, or in the 80s, vodka was king. That's why all of a sudden, like, you could get 20-year-old, 23-year-old American bourbon, unheard of years. But now, like, because it's gone crazy, those ages have gone down. So you do have like something rare, but it's cyclical, right? Like, our kids might not want to drink bourbon. They might be They might be into like no alcohol at all. They might be into Zima. They might be into Bartle and James. Who knows what these crazy kids will get into? So, you know,
with all that stuff, you can't take it with you.
1,000%.
You know,
Absolutely.
You know, and Tony will tell
it.
you, I think that the cooler thing about whiskey than shoes is you get to share it with other people.
Share. Yes, absolutely.
You know,
and experience that, you know, opening a bottle with someone, right? And having that shared experience. Absolutely.
You know, one of my authors at Malt Review, Frank, Burbier Enthusiasm, love him.
That's
like
my guy.
Yeah, man. I mean, we talk Knicks. Yeah. I mean, we did a couple like Knicks Bulls post game, like whiskey talks and reviews.
Nice.
And he sent me a couple samples. And I don't know if you all knew this. Frank was the first dude to ever comment on one of my articles.
Wow.
So I did a Knob Creek review. Frank did the comment. I didn't know who he was at the time. And I'm just like, oh, dude, I'm happy to send you a sample, not knowing like who he was, like, and all the samples that he's got. So he sent me a sample, and we traded in these little 2-ounce bottles. And I kept half of the Kings County high proof. And when it was his birthday, I said, hey, man, I can't be there for your birthday, but I'm going to pour this out and I'm going to enjoy this because it came from you. Like that's like the cool memories. Like that's what you're going to take with you. And that's what other people are going to remember you by. They're not going to remember that I had Jordan 12s. They're not going to remember that I had 23. Right. You know, they're going to know that, you know, I got to share a pour.
That was a good dude.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
To be debated if I'm a good guy or not, Tony, but
I think you're a good guy.
I appreciate that.
All right. Well,
this was great.
This is great. Thanks for coming on. We should probably wrap things up. Well, we should also probably plug, you guys are talking about whiskey. A lot of people don't know that, you know, my co-host Tony has another podcast, A Steady Pour.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And then Matt, what's your whiskey association specifically?
Yeah. So it's maltreview.com is where I primarily write. I write an article a month. You know, I get the cool thing about Malt Review, and just for everybody, and I think this is why Frank is just brilliant. I still say Frank is like the best whiskey writer.
He's great
right now, period, like bar none. So check out Burbier Enthusiasm and Frank's reviews on maltreview.com, because maltreview.com for us, we don't just go in there and say, okay, smells like sandalwood, caramel, vanilla, 5 out of 10, right? Like we don't do that. So we actually try to tell stories. My last article was about it's called a bottle share, Jay. So I actually went, and people are like pouring legendary whiskey from the 60s and 70s, like, you know, and it's not to show off. It's to say,
just to share the experience.
Right.
Oh man, I'm sorry we're running long. I'll tell you a story. So we did this charity event. So I was able to attend this charity event, and there's like these giants of the whiskey industry in there, right? And one of the guys that's part of the organization that put it on, in the hotel lobby before we went to dinner, I guess he befriended this couple that I don't know. It was like some like R&B, some jazz concert was in town. And now it's post party. Everybody's in the hotel lobby. 3,800 bottles. Who knows how many are open in the hotel lobby? Like they're just letting us do this in the hotel lobby. And they're walking by. They're coming back from the concert. And this guy, by the way, gave me like a $25 cigar to puff on. I didn't come with a cigar. I came very ill prepared. Like the generosity. And all of a sudden he's like, y'all like whiskey? And they're like, and she's like, I don't know. The guy's like, hell yeah, I like whiskey. And they go up, and they have no idea that like the rarest of the rarest whiskeys are up there. But guess what? No, like nobody said, oh, you're not going to appreciate, you know, this rare character Amberana finish by Rare Bird. Nobody said that, you know. Nobody said, oh no, this is Stitzel Weller, Old Fitzgerald from 1973. Nobody said that. Everybody's like, hey, whatever you want to try. We're here. Welcome. And I think that's
great
the cool
community.
Thing. Absolutely. Yeah. Tony knows.
Yeah,
cool.
Absolutely. That's one thing I've been really, I guess, I thought it would be fun and something to do. And, you know, just being into whiskey in general, it seems like a cool thing to get into. But when you realize like the amount of people that are out there and that are generous with their time, and, you know, just the people we've talked to and are willing to talk to us, and it's really cool.
Yep. 1,000%.
Yeah.
So sorry, that was my plug for whiskey.
No.
That's my plug for shoes.
Good.
Yeah.
All right. And of course, the SwooshLife Podcast.
give them a follow.
If you're into Nike apparel and shoes and all that, you should definitely check it out.
Golf
on all the platforms and on YouTube.
Yep. We just launched YouTube this year, and we just did a giveaway for the Masters. So even if you're into any kind of sneaker, give us a follow. We're always giving sneak peeks. We get pretty good, reliable insider info. And you're welcome to golf. Welcome to whatever it is. Whether it's a hobby. The whole point of hobbies is not just to show off, but to get to know people. So, and
awesome.
Lead me to this great podcast. So once again, thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely.